Hey everyone and welcome.
Or welcome back
to the Wizarding World Legacy Podcast, where we explore the magic of the Wizarding World's past, present, and future.
We're your host,
Eric
and Jasmine. Today, we are going to be diving into not one, but two castings from the Harry Potter? We're talking about Harry Potter here, right?
We're talking about Harry Potter.
I think we're talking about Harry Potter.
The Harry Potter TV show.
Oh, yes. Not the films, not the books, TV show. Today, we are talking about Filch and Quirrell because their first names don't matter.
So we're going to start with the cat-obsessed caretaker himself.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
The one and only Filch.
So who is Arug Filch?
Arug Filch is, which I recently learned, he is mentioned by name and briefly described in the Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone for those of us across the pond. He's only mentioned by name very briefly in the first book as the Hogwarts Caretaker. And when he's mentioned, it's when Dumbledore's been asked to remind you.
It's almost always when Dumbledore has been asked to remind you, actually.
I agree with that.
If you Command F or Apple F on the Kindle books and try to find Filch, the first mention of him is, the caretaker Filch has asked me to remind you, like almost every book. It's crazy.
That's incredible. Yeah. So Dumbledore clearly heeds Filch's requests.
Or at least entertains them in the form of an announcement.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I'd feel somewhat validated.
Yeah.
But,
the least they can do for him. We'll get into why later.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But he's the Hogwarts caretaker. And there's a lot to him.
But not a lot of descriptors.
No, which, again, so Eric has taken the time to go through at least 6 of 7 books.
Yeah, I didn't bother with the 7th one because for some reason it was removed from my Kindle library for some reason. I'll have to investigate that later.
Yeah, we'll get into it. We'll report back.
2, because if they haven't given you a solid physical description by the 7th book...
Right. I feel like we just might not be getting one at all.
Some of the adjectives used to describe Filch throughout this series include things like bulging eyes, bulbous nose, and that was mostly when he was sick in the, I think, 2nd book.
Sure.
Knobbly hands, flat-footed, which is mentioned multiple times, pasty-faced, pouchy cheeks, quivering jowls, and a squib.
And a squib. What is a squib?
A squib is a person born from magical parents, but without the ability to perform magic themselves. So almost like a muggle, but not.
But worse.
But worse, because you know of the magical world.
Right.
You can be involved within the magical world, but you can't fully partake of the magical world.
Wait, can he see?
So there is an interesting theory. For those of you who don't know, a muggle who would happen upon a Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry would simply see ruins, a ruined castle, with a sign that says, like, turn back. And then there's magical wards to cause their brain to say, I probably shouldn't go here. I'm going to turn around. There was a theory about him not actually being able to see, like, everything. And so he thinks he's cleaning ruins the whole time, but he can see the people.
That would be terrible.
That would be terrible. I think J.K. Rowling responded to that theory because there was enough people asking about it and said, no, he can see it. Squibs can, like, see the magical world and be involved in the magical world. They just can't do magic.
That's kind of a bummer.
Yeah, it's sad.
But I appreciate Joan getting back to us on the fact that he can, in fact, see his place of work.
Yeah, kind of important. Although the fact that he works there at all is not important.
No.
He shouldn't have to do anything he does when they could all just wave a wand and do everything he does in 2 seconds.
Right.
But it takes him hours.
So when we say caretaker, we do mean janitor.
Yep. He is a literal janitorial staff. The only
janitorial staff. And for some I guess you could consider the house elves.
No, you could consider them chefs. You could consider them...
They go around to all of the common rooms and pick up. That's how they end up almost...
So housekeepers, maybe, but not janitors.
Not janitor. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Point taken. So they have a squib who knows about the muggle world, but can't do magic at all.
Living the Wizarding world, they can't do magic.
Yes. Living in the castle, cleaning by hand after every single student in there, watching students from the age of 11.
Including the Weasleys.
Just the Weasleys.
In the best way.
I was going to say. Watching all of these kids learning magic that he could never learn.
Yeah. Even with a quick spell subscription.
What's a quick spell?
So he tries to go through the quick spell program in order to learn magic.
Okay.
Because they say they can teach even the most rudimentary of wizards to be able to perform magic. So it's like this kind of scam program. It's like your infomercial kind of like program to wizards who just are terrible at magic. But he thinks he's a wizard and not just a squib. Somebody didn't break the news to him. In any case, so Filch, we don't have much of a physical descriptor for. Why does that matter? Well, because it's part of how you would think to cast a person for the upcoming series. And we did have somebody obviously already play this role. I think that's David. Yep. David
Bradley. David.
Oh my God, ew, David.
Who's been involved in series with one of the other upcoming casts. So the new Hagrid, Nick Frost.
He's been in a lot of things with a lot of people, Nick Frost has.
Nick Frost has, but so has David Bradley. He's been in a ton of British television, a ton.
But like Nick Frost he's acted with Harry before. He's acted
with the new
Filch
Harry before, yeah.
Yes, the upcoming Harry.
Yep. The previous Filch. And I think there may be one or two other actors that he's been involved with in other films too. But in any case, Filch was in like the Shaun of the Dead, or I should say, Cornetto trilogy, Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and those kind of things. And a lot of the stuff he's been in the past has been comedies.
Yeah.
Which kind of plays into the casting for the new Filch.
Very much so.
Just a little bit more in the description of the character himself rather than just David Bradley. He is somebody who we hear about constantly feuding with another character we can't wait to see on screen.
Peeves
the Poltergeist.
Peeves the Poltergeist.
There's also another interesting theory about Filch being a poltergeist.
Is this not your theory?
It's not. No, the Super Carlin brothers on YouTube have an awesome theory on why Filch is not a squib, but actually a poltergeist. And it's a pretty good theory. I'm not going to get into it here. If you guys want, I'll link it below so that you guys can go to that video. I definitely recommend you check it out. It's a great theory video.
Can you give us a 5-second overview?
But the 5-second overview is basically that they are not parallels.
Opposites.
Yeah, I guess you could say parallels. They're opposites of one another. So Peeves is the physical manifestation, if you will, or paraphysical manifestation.
Supernatural.
Sure. Of angst and chaos and all that stuff.
Which you would get with a school full of teens.
Full of angsty teens. So he's sort of the
magical teens.
So he's the manifestation of that magic in the environment of Hogwarts. And we know he's a poltergeist. This is very well described in the books, but also on Pottermore.com.
Real quick, poltergeists, they're different than ghosts because they can interact with the physical environment. Yeah,
so poltergeists are often confused as ghosts because they often appear as a ghostly apparition type of form.
They can fly, go through walls.
Yep. But they can, when they want to, be corporeal in the sense of picking things up and moving them. We see this happen multiple times in the series. One of those times has to do with getting Harry out of trouble because a ghost tells Peeves to drop a cabinet, which comes up later in the series. And it breaks and Filch runs upstairs and he's already peeved because he's sick and he's dealing with all this crap. In any case, Peeves the Poltergeist is sort of the manifestation of the chaos, whereas Filch is the manifestation of order and discipline. And he wants everything just so. I don't want to be dealing with the damn students. And so he's kind of the opposition to Peeves's character. It's a great theory. Again, I do recommend you check out the whole explanation for that, which I'll link below. But really, he's just a squib. That's the reality of it. I do think J.K. Rowling responded to that theory too. I'll have to look into that. But
I was going to say, we will fact check and comment below.
Yes. But that would be an interesting thing if it had been real.
If it had been real, it would have given our actor a lot to work with.
It would have. He's also weirdly involved with his cat, Mrs. Norris.
Well, take a good look, lads.
You say involved. He's just always with her.
Not just with her. It's almost like he has this like telepathic communication with her. Like they just, she
gets upset. He's there.
Or she spots a student doing something that they shouldn't be, and all of a sudden he's there in an instant.
Students out of bed! Students in the corridor!
They are supposed to be out of bed, you blithering idiot.
Oh. Sorry, Mom.
Right.
So it's like there's this weird connection between the two that nobody can explain. There are also some theories around that maybe they were lovers at one point, in the sense that she was a human.
Yep.
And
The
maybe
cat was at one point, before cat form,
right.
a human.
So she could have had a blood curse and became a cat.
Yes.
Or she could be an animagus, or she's...
Lots of different ways that this could have happened, but in her human form...
There's many ways to skin a cat.
Oh, good God. In her human form, she may have, in fact, been in love with Filch.
Or he's just weird.
Or he just really likes cats. We happen to not. So I don't fully get it.
Don't take offense, but I'm not a cat person.
Not a cat person.
More of a dog person.
People.
And then he also has pretty strong feelings. This is something we hear over and over again about punishment.
Ah, yes.
Want to see some punishment?
He also is, really reminiscent of those old days where I guess historically at Hogwarts, they would hang students from their thumbs in the dungeon as a form of punishment.
A pity they let the old punishments die. God, I'll miss the screaming.
Again, the actor that we have seen portray this wonderful man was David Bradley, and he really, I think, brought Filch's character to life.
There's so many different ways this character could have gone. He could have been absolutely loathed. He could have been a nothing character, and it's possible that people never would have even noticed him. But there is sort of a love-hate relationship with David Bradley's portrayal of Filch.
There's a lot of things that get cut in movies, right? Movies, and one of the reasons that this re-release of the series as a TV show is wonderful is because you do get to dive deeper. In movies, lots of things get cut. So a caretaker is certainly somebody you could cut, although he does contribute directly to the plot. Some of the things that were great were, his hair. It was constantly kind of greasy. And,
his hair, his face, the way he can make his lip quiver, his hunch.
And it's funny because David Bradley, he doesn't look drastically different than his character, but he can look so incredibly presentable compared to Filch.
Polished and professional.
And he just despite looking, just like surface level kind of similar.
Yes.
It's a different person. He totally transforms himself when he becomes Filch. It's great.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, David Bradley, incredible actor.
Great actor.
Props to him.
Even if you don't recognize how he's impacting the storyline,
right? He
made his character unforgettable, for sure.
So my question is, how do you redo that?
So I think the thing is, you don't redo it. You do it different. You do it new.
You do it new.
You do it new.
Or are we going to do it new?
So we're going to do it new, ironically, with somebody who has already been in the Harry Potter series.
Wait, what?
With Paul Whitehouse, who starred as Sir Cadogan.
Wow.
How about you? He actually was already in the series. He's going to be in it again. I think that's hilarious because they were trying not to recast people.
They were trying not to recast people, but
it was such an obscure role.
I was going to say, there's no way that people are like, oh my God, Sir Cadogan.
So he's a beloved British comedian. He's primarily in comedy roles historically, although he's done, I think, a couple other documentary pieces and other kind of...
In his early years, he did a lot of sketch comedy. So he was in The Fast Show, Harry Enfield and Chums. But more later in his career, he did the show Gone Fishing.
Hi, I'm Paul Whitehouse.
He took a cast member that he had previously worked with and they go fishing.
Yeah. It's just so British.
It's so incredibly British, and it's very wholesome.
He's also done voice work. So he was the March Hare in Tim Burton's 2010 Alice in Wonderland. And he just brings this lightheartedness and joviality to the characters that he portrays. And I think that's not something that is totally unfitting with Filch.
And I think it's important that we start distinguishing Filch in the books versus Filch in the movies.
Yeah.
Filch in the movies was a lot of just character development because there isn't a ton of, physical descriptors to work with there.
Nope.
And there is certainly more of Filch's story to dive into that wasn't even touched upon in the movies.
Yeah, so the whole him being a squib, the quick spell kind of fiasco that he gets into with Harry, there's a ton of things in there that you just never hear about in the movies.
Right.
And I think the ability to flesh that out more on screen in the form of the TV show is going to be great. Mm-hmm. And it gives a way for a new actor to come in and kind of just make Filch his own.
Make Filch his own. I think both my hope and my fear is that by diving into Filch's background and giving his character, making it understandable about how he became who he is today, I worry that I'll empathize with Filch.
Oh dear, we are in trouble.
I don't want to feel bad for Filch.
I don't want that.
No.
But I do.
I just want more. I think in the books, his character is kind of funny.
Yes.
And not in an intentional way, but I do think that Paul can pull that off. Like the unintentionally funny
Yes.
caretaker.
I think that's where he'll thrive.
Yeah, I do too. So Paul Whitehouse is going to be taking on the role of Arug Filch in the new series.
He's in his 60s.
If I'm not mistaken, I think like wizards, squibs have this magical nature where they don't necessarily age quite as quickly. So even though I think Filch's character is supposed to be a little bit older than his 60s in the show, or in the books.
Right.
I'm not entirely certain because, again, not a ton of physical descriptors, but he can look, old if they want him to, or sort of middle-aged if they want him to, and I think it'll work because you can play it off from either perspective of, they age differently.
Right.
So I'm excited for that. I think he's going to do a good job, and I'll be interested to see how his comedic background serves the role.
I think this is the one of the castings where I'm most I don't know that I saw it originally because most of his work is pretty comedic or lighthearted or wholesome.
And he's kind of a nice looking, he looks like he'd smile at you.
Yeah, exactly.
Filch historically, I didn't think of him.
Eyes.
Yeah. Filch doesn't strike me that way. Again,
David
bulging
Bradley
eyes.
Does not strike me that way.
Yeah, David Bradley, although I've heard he is
a nice man.
A super nice guy in person. But when you see the characters he portrays, Walder Frey in the Game of Thrones, I'll not be wasting wine on a damn woman.
Says it too often.
To her. He, plays Arug Filch. Even the characters he plays in his comedy sketches, he's kind of like this kooky old man that you don't necessarily feel like approaching.
I will say, I was watching some of the clips from the Fast show, and there is one, particular sketch in which Paul Whitehouse is playing sort of a drunk man, and he sort of gets into that, energy that I could see in Filch.
Yeah.
But I haven't 100% seen it yet.
So it'll be interesting to see how he fleshes that out.
Exactly. So Filch is one of those roles that I think might be pretty significantly different from what we've seen historically in the films.
And I'm okay with it.
I'm open to it.
As long as the story beats are there in how he interacts with the main plot, I think however he pulls that off is fine.
Very much so.
That's not one where you're he's got to look this way, he's got to act this way. There are certain characters that are that way.
Very much so.
I don't think Filch has to be one of those, and I'm okay with a little bit of a deviation. Well, I'm okay with a reasonable deviation from what we've already seen. But a little bit of a deviation even from what we might have interpreted the books as.
Right. Overall, I would say I am cautiously optimistic and very curious about where this will go. I would say that fans, generally speaking, in the UK are excited. I mean, Paul Whitehouse, he's a respected actor.
Kind of a household name in some areas in the UK for sure. So we do have another casting that we want to discuss. Another, I guess, not big to the storyline in the sense of every book, but certainly big to the storyline as it starts out.
For sure.
And that's Quirinus Quirrel.
I always struggle to determine how I feel about Quirinus Quirrell, but for those of you who might not know, Quirinus Quirrell is the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher in Harry's first year at Hogwarts.
Not that you need it, eh, Potter?
Now that I'm thinking about it, there is a curse on the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher's position in which no Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher lasts more than a year.
That's right.
But hadn't Quirrell served as a professor previously? Or was this his first year?
This is his first year.
Oh, interesting.
Obviously, he went to Hogwarts. He was a Ravenclaw. We know that.
Right.
And he was very smart. He was very talented. He wanted to... The story that we get from Hagrid in the books is that he wanted to get some practical knowledge, right?
Yes.
Get some knowledge in the field.
He was very bookish.
Wanted to get some knowledge in the field.
Street smart.
And ended up going to Albania.
Albania?
And for people who know the story well, there was somebody hiding out in the Black Forest of Albania. Indeed. And so he comes across him. Now, that is something that I really, really hope is explored in this. When Hagrid is telling the story in the movies, I hope we get glimpses of that. Obviously, Hagrid's not going to know the Voldemort part.
Right.
So it wouldn't necessarily see that in that part of the story. But then at the end of the book,
We can
Or
do flashbacks.
When Quirinus is kind of telling how he met his master, he can sort of divulge a little bit of that information, and we can start to see shown on screen in the form of flashbacks. I think that would be awesome.
Quirinus Quirrel, Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher,
Yes.
went to go get experience in Albania. In Albania, he meets Voldemort. Voldemort sort of seduces him.
As well as some hags and vampires and things.
Right. Meets lots of different peeps, particularly Voldemort. Seduces him, and Voldemort's like, hey, could I rent out space on the back of your head?
Well, no.
No. Okay.
Not right away.
Wrong.
No, not wrong. Just skipping ahead. Voldemort basically persuades him to work for him, so to speak, to be his confidant and be the one.
Convinces him of the claws.
Exactly. And he actually isn't, that manifestation in the back of his head. He's not possessing him when we first meet Quirrell. It's an important distinction because one of the things that's come up is how does Quirrell shake Harry's hands and not get burnt when he sees him in the leaky cauldron?
Harry Potter, can't tell you how pleased I am to meet
Then
you.
later he simply touches him and he gets burnt. And that's because it's not until Quirrell fails a couple of times
To get the Sorcerer's Stone.
that Voldemort basically says, you're incompetent. Let me drive, right?
Yes.
And so when we hear him crying in the classroom by himself, and Harry thinks that he's cowering to Snape,
Yep.
he's actually cowering to Voldemort, who then possesses him, takes root on his
Rents out space.
occipital lobe, not optical lobe.
Occipital? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, little too close to comfort for me.
Yes.
Wouldn't be that comfortable, that close to anybody.
So I think people, when they read the books and then watched the movies, thought that the giant turban was to hide Voldemort. It wasn't, because it wasn't there yet.
Right.
I think it was more of a plot convenience for when Voldemort was then there.
Right. Do we have, in the book, do we discuss when the turban...
Well, the turban's there right away.
Okay, so then the turban is likely just full of garlic.
Yeah. And I think it becomes a plot convenience for hiding Voldemort later.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
He is always described as nervous, stammering, garlic-scented.
Poor stuttering Professor Quirrell.
And then later in the school year, we find out, obviously, that he is secretly hosting Voldemort and has been kind of his way of getting into the castle the whole time. He gets through with this mask of this nervous professor, but really, whoever's taking on this role has a difficult role cut out for him, because you have to be this nervous, anxious, but somewhat ambitious student turned professor.
Right.
That is really like the literal embodiment of evil at this point.
Well, he becomes the literal embodiment of evil. And I
Yeah, but he is at his nature kind of an evil person, because while he is taking this position on at Hogwarts, he has the intention of helping Voldemort all along.
Yeah, but
Like, he's a bad dude from the
Is he,
start.
though?
From the start of that school year, he is.
Voldemort seduced him and convinced him of the cause while he was... I mean, I don't imagine Voldemort had like a lot of magic to use and could, Imperio.
But one of Voldemort's key skills was his ability to manipulate people.
So then wouldn't you say...
But manipulated or not, he knows of Voldemort's role. He was studying to be the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor.
Right.
He knows of Voldemort's role in the First Wizarding War.
Couldn't you say that Quirrell, after spending time with Voldemort, was manipulated into believing that Voldemort's way of being was the right way to be, and so he no longer felt that what Voldemort was doing was wrong?
You could.
You could.
You could. But now we're going to draw a parallel to like the Nuremberg trials after Nazi Germany, when they said, well, I was just following the orders and I thought that I was doing the right thing. And so, yeah, I killed lots of people, but that was what I was told to do, and it felt like the right thing. And then they just, were trialed for war crimes, because a war crime is a war crime whether or not you think it was right.
Be punished. I just feel like in considering the character development, it might be important to consider that Quirrell likely wasn't an evil student, didn't have an evil upbringing. Like, it's not like, oh, he has all of the signs of a psychopath where he's killing animals.
No, but
wetting the bed.
Although he is killing animals.
Well,
before he's possessed by Voldemort, he drank the unicorn blood for him.
It's only after he was, like, manipulated.
Right. But you're committing evil acts.
Right.
And he was going into this role knowing that he was going to have to deceive people. Right? And so I do think that the deception of the whole, like, very, you know, shy professor, I think that was an act the whole time. I don't think he really was shy.
Well,
and so there's
is that
this
evidenced in the books or the movies, though? Because in the movies, he suddenly stopped stuttering at the end.
Well, it is suggested at the end, even in the books, that he was this meek person, but he wasn't. He never was, right? Like, he says, I was never that person. That was just a facade to...
Okay.
Yeah. Not in so many words, but he's basically says that.
Kind of goes in as a manipulator. I think he's got a bad influence. Had he not met Voldemort, I don't think he would have turned out evil. So I just think that's important to put into consideration because I think that might play into the character development
and I think
of
if they
the actor that we will eventually get to.
And I think if they show those flashbacks, that would help show that.
I agree.
So who have we seen? Let's start with that. Who have we seen in this role?
So previously, in the films, Ian Hart played Quirrell.
And a lot of people had mixed feelings about his portrayal because he didn't get much character development.
No. So I think his work was fine.
Yeah. On a surface level, it was fine. Exactly.
It was totally fine. Not bad. But I don't think that there was enough time or, you know...
That's the big thing.
Exactly. Like time or script dedicated to developing his character.
Right.
It was just like, how quickly can we get people to understand...
How quickly can we make people have a false confidence in him?
Right.
And then immediately shift to, oh no, he's the bad guy. I think it leads to a lack of attachment to him and a lack of sympathy for him because throughout the story, we're led to believe that Snape is just a freaking jerk, which... again, might have some problems with who they cast, but that aside, that Snape is a jerk who's like bullying this young professor. We're kind of like rooting for him, and we see Harry rooting for him, like, yo, we got you, Quirrell.
Nah,
we got you.
Harry and Hermione, we're going to look out for you.
Yeah, like, we got you. And the reality is, he's the bad guy. So, like, they're rooting for the bad guy, unbeknownst to them. You don't get that out of the movies.
No,
you don't.
You definitely don't.
And that's one of the shortcomings of putting something so, you know, long into such a relatively short form of storytelling.
Right.
You know, and so this is another nice thing about fleshing out these characters in a longer form.
And I'm starting to sort of, as we're talking about these characters, the characters that were, you know, sort of curtailed in the films, I'm starting to worry that, you know, I'm going to fall for certain characters and absolutely sympathize with them. It's giving a very Game of Thrones vibe where I was so like okay with certain characters and then suddenly they were ripped away, or I empathized with them and then I learned that empathy was thoroughly misplaced.
You were manipulated like Quirrell. I think because you know the whole story that will be less apt to happen to you, but I do see how that could definitely happen to somebody seeing this for the first time who hasn't read all the books. Because I think it happened to most of us when we read the books. That was the point.
I mean, like, I personally have a great propensity for empathizing with people who I know will turn out negative in the end.
Well.
One of my character flaws.
Yeah, we all have them.
Oops.
She has more than most, but.
For sure.
Just kidding.
But beyond that, I think that with the show and more time, there's a lot of opportunity for this character development to create something much more complex.
More of an attachment to his character.
Exactly. And I'm curious about how that'll play out across the age ranges that might be watching this. Because anytime you talk about people who are going to be watching this, you have like the 7-year-olds who are just looking at the 11-year-olds acting for the first time. And then you have people that are like 50 who are like, oh, I grew up with this series. Yeah. I'm super excited.
I mean, let's not throw 50 out there. That's hurtful.
Neither of us are 50 yet.
I think the other thing that kind of like leads into is that there are story beats that end up having to be left out as a result of cutting down the film.
Yes.
Including like how they got into...
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, to where the Philosopher's Stone was being held.
Right.
We're not going to get into that because I would like us to dedicate a whole episode to things missing from the series that we really, really want to see. And I think we'll take it season by season.
Snape's part.
We'll take it season by season, but I want people to comment down below if you want us to do an episode on like things that were missing from the books in the movies that could definitely be done here. Let us know that you want to see that because I would love to do that. And I think we could
thorough deep dive
of every single book. Why don't we dip into who has been cast for Quirinus Quirrel?
Oh, yeah, that's the reason we're here today.
That is actually the reason we're here.
Okay, so today we're here to talk about Luke Thallen.
So Luke Thallen is definitely better known in the UK.
For sure.
I don't think he has much in the way of an international recognition, like at all.
Because a lot of his work is stage work.
No, tear it up. You were quite right about it. It was only written with a part of myself. I can see that.
So he's done a couple things in the realm of like film or just like TV film kind of stuff, but it's mostly stage.
Very much so. And even some of his stage work has been filmed, but it was still stage work.
Yeah. So Luke Thallen is a rising star in the British theatre area of British theatre. He was known for Albion. You're going to say the next word.
Leopoldstadt.
Thank you. Patriots and Hamlet. So he, Hamlet in particular is a very complex play or stage production.
Actually, period.
By nature. Yeah, just period. And he has gotten some pretty rave reviews for his performance in Hamlet. I think he's got some pretty good acting chops. I actually have watched some of the, YouTube videos that show clips of Hamlet and some of the other stage plays.
I haven't seen the Hamlet ones, but he was in Present Laughter. And that is a stage play that has been filmed. And so I've watched some clips of him in that. And he does seem incredibly talented, and he does have a very wide range, which I think will be very important for this role.
If I remember, in that one, he actually has like a... Right, but he also has like a little bit of a twist where he's a little bit crazy in that? Is that the one I'm thinking of? Or is it Hamlet that he has that twist where... Because there's one that was... I think he also did
Los Dos.
He's done emotionally complex roles.
Yes, and he's done sort of that twist part.
Yeah.
Which to manifest as one character and then to very quickly manifest the same person, but in a very different light.
Is exactly Quirrell.
Exactly.
So I think he's somebody who's going to be able to pull it off. The other nice thing about his casting is he's definitely way more age appropriate than the previous casting.
Yes.
One of the running themes with the previous cast was like totally inappropriate, age casting. One of the things that was put out there by J.K. Rowling was she really wanted, as soon as she knew he was interested in the part, she really wanted Alan Rickman as Severus Snape.
I too wanted that.
Yeah, and who could blame her? I mean, he did such a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
The problem was he was in no way age appropriate for that character. He was supposed to actually be quite young.
Mm-hmm.
Younger than me, actually. A little bit older than you, but younger than me. When they cast him, when they solidified that, they really kind of cast everybody around him so that things were age appropriate.
I'm not mad about.
I mean...
I'm excited for a more accurate representation. Yeah. However, I am very grateful that I got Alan Rickman.
Me too.
Dame Maggie Smith.
Obviously.
And Robbie Coltrane. So
he's definitely way more age appropriate. I think that can play into the believability of sort of his meek, shy persona when he comes into the role.
Yeah, I agree.
And then it's going to further contrast his mental twist, his psychological twist when he becomes this servant for Voldemort.
Yeah. I would say that I think that for most of the castings that have been made so far, most of, not all of, most of.
One in particular not, but
most of. The both of us are excited for most of them, and we can very much see where the showrunners are coming from. We have at least some idea or a hope of where they'll take the characters, and I think the same is true for Luke Thallen. As far as the fan reaction has gone, though, because he's a lesser known name, it's been a little bit of a quieter reaction. People have been more curious just because they haven't seen him in anything.
He's not, in the grand storyline, he's not the most important character to exist. No. Obviously, in the first book, he plays an incredibly pivotal role.
Dumbledore just lets him keep doing, but continue.
Right. But in the grand scheme of the story, by the time you're in the fourth or fifth book, his character is highly forgettable.
For sure.
I think having the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into his character, especially if you watch the movies only, his character is incredibly forgettable.
Absolutely.
Not because of anything the former actor did wrong. It's just you didn't have that much time to get that emotional attachment to him like you would have in the books. I do think a good deep dive into his character, developing that emotional attachment, will make his character more important to us. And just, I think kind of the way you go through TV series versus book series that you're reading as they come out, he'll be a little bit more memorable if he's done right.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he'll be a little I think that all characters will be a little bit more memorable. I'm curious about sort of the actor's perspective, and of course I'd be thrilled to have any role in this series at all. But everyone who's been cast so far is someone who will likely be present throughout the entire series.
Except for him.
I
didn't even think about that, yeah.
I think I'm just wondering about, you're going into this huge, massive production. Everyone's planning for it to span 10 years. I wonder.
Except for you.
Except for you. It's like, thank you. We want you involved on the ground floor. We want to start with you. And then, I don't know, a year or two later, things were coming.
Because he was one of the first 6.
Yeah, he was one of the first 6. He is part of the top 10, like
or
the
original
first 10 people cast
officially
in this series, like the announcements that have gone out.
I didn't even think of it
And I'm just like wondering, like, I don't know, I'd have such a hard time because you get so attached to everyone and everyone gets so excited. You're working together and everyone else in the series can plan to stay together for the next 10 years, whereas you have to somewhat distance. I'm really enjoying this time working with you guys.
For this year.
Won't see you next year, though. Maybe remember me, if you could.
Remember me.
Remember me. Remember him.
Remember that.
So honestly, like, I am excited for his role. I'm curious about how he's processing.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because if they do flesh out his character more, obviously that'll give him more time with the other actors and actresses.
It'll hurt.
And so it almost hurts more to see him go. But
it'll hurt.
But you don't want to attach yourself to him too much because he's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Or supposed to be. Yeah, that's Luke Thalman. I think he'll do a good job.
I agree.
I think he's got what it takes.
Anyone who's willing to put himself through that kind of a hurt might be exactly the right person we're looking for.
Yeah, I agree.
For this role. As of right now, that wraps up every official casting.
There is one more rumored casting.
Hypothetical.
Yeah. We're going to do some digging in this, and so I'm not even going to say the actress's name. I'll say the character's name. Mm-hmm. There is a rumor that perhaps there has been a casting, so make sure you stay tuned for our next episode, for Ginny Weasley. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say who.
I imagine that the kids will start coming out, because I imagine the 32,000 tapes that they reviewed probably contained characters
outside of the Golden
children.
Trio. Yeah. I think they're going to start rolling out relatively quickly. There was something about every 7 to 9 days we might see another casting announcement made. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, we're about due, and that kind of lined up with this casting announcement. I think it was like a day late from the anticipated announcement cycle. We'll keep you guys informed as to whether or not we have any official further casting announcements. We'll make sure to cover that here.
Make sure that you're subscribed so that you are notified when
ring
we
the
are
bell
notified.
so that you're notified.
Yes.
And you don't miss any episodes. Any more magical announcements.
Also, don't forget to maybe.
Leave a comment.
If you liked it.
I do want to hear if people want us to do that
breakdown
deep dive that we talked about.
What we could dive in further to, or could see altogether in a new light.
Like things that were just left out that would be really cool to see with each
They're gone.
book. Leave a comment on that, but also leave a comment on what you think about these casting choices. Do you think that both of these guys will do a good job?
Paul Whitehouse, Luke Fallon. What are your thoughts?
What did or didn't you like about the previous castings? And that could be something as simple as like their character wasn't fleshed out enough. It doesn't have to be about the person itself. It could be the process. Or it can be about the previous actor and how they might have varied from what you pictured for the role. And just let us know if you're enjoying these casting breakdowns. We're having a good time presenting them to you guys.
I'm learning a lot.
It's great to kind of see who's going to be depicting these future characters. And until next time, keep your wands at the ready.
And stay magical.
Finite.